Today we're asking, is it a tipping point or a turning point? If you've been coming to services here for a while, that phrase might sound familiar to you. You may even be wondering if I've decided to just start using the stuff my dad wrote in the past. For anyone who doesn't know it, Reverend Terry is my father. The answer to that is yes and no. Yes, I'm borrowing a phrase he's used before. I'm definitely speaking from the same core concepts he has taught here for years. In fact, every single time I've stood up here, I've spoken about something he has taught over and over. And if I didn't, honestly, I'd be doing you a disservice. The difference is, I think you'll find my approach and my perspective and the way I connect the dots, so to speak, they're kind of different from his. My father and I speak a common language, yet the intention and primary points of focus we each emphasize up here are often completely different. And to me, that's exciting. What's even more exciting is that if everything goes according to plan, my dad and I will be working together to bring you weekly talks on a common theme each month. Until forever. We'll each prepare talks, broad strokes, right? Forever. So, we'll each prepare talks for a couple of Sundays. Maybe consecutive, maybe we'll alternate, who knows? But we'll be following along the same narrative at all times. Now, this is really, really cool because I recently had the honor of listening to my father read the words I wrote verbatim. I knew the words. I knew the intention I'd held when I committed them to paper. But when I heard him speaking them, I completely lost that familiarity. The way he spoke, the emphasis he used, the little ad-libs, I learned things that I hadn't even realized were hidden in there. That's cool. So I'm excited to see what develops as we move into this phase of ongoing cooperative talks. I know I'm going to learn. Ooh, he's wringing his hands up here. I know I'm going to learn a lot, more than I can even imagine right now. And I know the same will be true for you. Okay, so tipping point or turning point. We've all heard the idea of a tipping point, right? That's the moment at which there's enough critical mass for a major change to occur. In today's world, that's often used to describe where we are globally, particularly environmentally. If we tip too far in the direction of destroying the earth, we won't be able to get her back. And that is definitely a concern. But there are all sorts of examples of tipping points and turning points in our everyday lives. Take Michael Jordan, for example. Divine inspiration, right? Michael Jordan is considered by many to be the greatest basketball player of all time. But very few people realize that as a sophomore in high school, he was cut from his school's varsity basketball team. It devastated him. And he learned from it. He made a conscious decision to make that a turning point. And that choice is one that he carries throughout his life. Here's what he said about failure. I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. On 26 occasions, I have been entrusted to take the game-winning shot, and I've missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. That's what I want us to explore this month. The idea of turning points, those moments of decision, those moments when we, individually or collectively, decide to make a shift, to head in a different direction, to view things another way, and accompany them with a new behavior. Now, the results of turning points are radically different outcomes. Or, said another way, turning points result in completely different tipping points. Think about that for a minute. This month, supported by the strong foundation of our Science of Mind teachings, we'll have personal turning point moments that'll tip us in the direction of greater love, greater joy, greater peace, and manifestation, which can have a significant impact on the entire world. So today, we lay the groundwork and we set the tone, not just for the month, but for the entire year. So I'm really glad you're here with us today. Julie McIntyre, she's the director of the Center for Earth Relations. She once said, "There comes a point when you know without a doubt, without hesitation, that you cannot go back to your old life. You cannot be who you once were and also have a new life." And that point is a turning point. So on this first Sunday of the new year, at a time when, again, individual and collective turning points are so important, we're going to take 5 perspectives on life and look at one way of viewing them and then the turning point ways of viewing them. Here's your mission. Identify where you are with each of them. Some of the old views may no longer be your views. You may have already fully and completely embodied the turning point view. And if that's the case, take a minute today to celebrate that, because that's big. But you're invited to take a really, really, really great opportunity to put them into practice everywhere in your lives this month and this year. Now, on the other hand, there may be some of you that think, I wish I had that new view. I'd like to have it. I know I'd be happier and healthier if I did, but I simply don't. I may have it in my head, but it hasn't made the 18-inch journey down to my heart. Those are the ones you have to pay very close attention to. Those turning point views are the ones that are yours to pick up and try on and decide to install them into the foundation of your belief system. Because they can. No, they will send your life in a very different direction. Now, I should note, visual aid time, the ideas that we're going to talk about today, as well as those that we're going to touch upon for the rest of the month, are adapted from a book called E Cubed by Pam Grout. This is the sequel to E Squared, and both are really incredible. They each contain 9 energy experiments, which, according to the book cover, prove that manifesting magic and miracles is your full-time gig. I have found these really cool. We're going to do some of these experiments this month, and I think you're going to agree with me. And when we're up and get the bookstore back to running, I'll make sure that they're available in there. So, let's look at old view number 1. God is a judgmental man outside of me, determining whether or not I am worthy of anything. This God is to be feared, and I have to be very, very good to gain favor with this God. I have to beg and plead and bargain with this God. God's punishments are measured out both here and in the afterlife. This is a view that a lot of the world has. This is not the God I grew up with, but I suspect a number of us did. As a child, I remember visiting a friend whose family held those beliefs and expressed them frequently. These were entirely new, foreign, and scary concepts to me. All of a sudden, I had all sorts of questions. Questions I quickly learned not to ask because the adults seemed to get more and more angry with me as I spoke. Running into that fear consciousness for the first time was truly a defining moment for me, a turning point moment. It's what set me firmly on the path to exploring and trying to understand other faiths. I wanted to figure out why people couldn't agree on the same things, and I wanted to maybe figure out the truth. And I have spent the great majority of my life doing that. And I still strive to speak a language which can be heard without defensiveness by people of all faiths. So that was old view number one. Here's turning point view one. God is an energy of love and creation that flows through all, sustains all, surrounds all. In fact, is all. The energetic world is a world of love, and it is the foundation on which all else rests. It's the building block that forms everything. How's this for a turning point view? In the words of Ernest Holmes, God is the living Spirit Almighty, one, indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. This Spirit is incarnated in everyone, and all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. There's eternal goodness, eternal loving kindness, and eternal givingness to all. How do you like that? Moving on to old view number two. The world is a scary place. Our job is to put on armor and work like heck to stay one step ahead of the terrorists, the Taoists. That's what almost came out of my mouth, the Taoists. The super germs, the unnecessarily enraged, self-entitled Karens. And please note, that is not a gender-specific term. I did the research, and because nobody seems to agree on a masculine equivalent of that, most are just calling them male Karens. And those, let me just point out, you're allowed to get upset. It's when you're unreasonably upset, without a reason, that's when Karen gets called. But that belief is that we have to do everything we can to keep the scary, spooky, predatory, great ooga boogas who are out to get us at every waking moment at bay. In this view of the world, our job is just to survive. Life sucks and then you die is the anthem of this old view. And I suspect that every one of us can name at least one person who has this view. The real question is that person you? You don't need to raise your hand. It's okay. Now let's look at turning point view two. The universe actually has our backs. And it's constantly conspiring for our good by sending us blessings, gifts, and guidance. Our turning point view says that we live in a cooperative, user-friendly world, and that no matter how it may appear to the naked eye, life in its pure, unadulterated form is a bubbling cauldron of possibilities composed of pure, perfect love. What if this idea were actually true? Again, in the words of Holmes, the ultimate goal of life is to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that you are sure to attain this goal. That's a big one. What if we all had that as our view? Wouldn't that be a turning point view for us? Wouldn't that be a turning point view for the entire world? Think about that, kids. I've been throwing some big ones out there, but that's a really big one. Okay, let's move to old view 3. Life happens to me. I'm an innocent bystander, a pitiful victim of circumstances, of weather, of disease, and worse, of my own dysfunction. External events constantly get in my face, in my space, in my conscious world. The best thing I can do is learn to cope with these external events. Now, I have to tell you, as I was typing that part, I thought, gosh, that sounds an awful lot like Eeyore. I mean, he's cute and all, but I don't think he's a very happy little dude, right? Nah. Okay, so let's look at turning point view 3. Life emanates from me. I create my world with my thoughts, my beliefs, and my energetic frequencies. The turning point view is that God operates through a universal mind, which we call the law of God. And we are surrounded by this creative mind, which receives the direct impressions of our thought and acts upon it. So it is directly within our power to affect the conditions and circumstances of our lives through the power of this universal mind. From the Science of Mind, pages 30 and 31, we cannot say that one thought is creative while another is not. We must say that all thought is creative according to the nature, impulse, emotion, or conviction behind the thought. Ignorance of this excuses no one from its effect, for we are dealing with law and not with whimsical fancy. So if you had this view, if you really had this view, how would you live? Maybe you'd be like Joe. Now, for most of his youth, Joe's family lived in a well-populated but largely agricultural town. And although they had to move away when Joe was still quite young, Joe never forgot his years there. To him, that place was absolutely idyllic. He'd had the perfect childhood. And so, many years later, after he'd grown up and gotten married, he and his wife moved back to his hometown, dreaming that one day their children would experience the same perfect childhood he'd had. An extra perk of living there was that because the area's agricultural yield was so great and they had enough residents to support it, the town had always kept a farmer's market running, which was open daily. Wouldn't that be cool? I thought so. So every single day, Joe visited the market, and he bought oranges from the old lady who ran the stand. After they were weighed, placed in a bag, and he'd paid, Joe would always pick one from the bag, carefully peel it, put a segment in his mouth, and then complain that it was sour and hand the remainder of the orange to the woman. She would then put a segment in her mouth and exclaim, "No, it's wonderfully sweet," only to look up and realize that he'd already gone. This scene played out day after day, week after week, for a few months. Now, his wife had noticed it on the days when she'd visit the market with him. And although she was kind of perplexed by the way her normally easygoing husband behaved, she'd never asked him about it. Until one day, when she finally realized that it had become a routine. So she waited until they'd walked a good distance away and then spoke up. "Joe," she said, "the oranges are always so sweet and juicy and ripe. They're consistently better than any oranges I've ever had before. Why do you always give her such a hard time about them?" Nodding his head toward the fruit stand, Joe smiled softly and replied, "That old lady's name is Molly. Molly's been there for as long as I can remember, since I was small enough to ride in a stroller. She sells the oranges, but I never once remember seeing her eat any herself. By faking a complaint, I get her to enjoy some of her amazing fruit without losing any money on the sale. The only way I could think of to get her to eat some without refusing." Someone else had taken notice of Joe's strange daily routine, so on the same day after Joe and his wife had walked away, the vegetable vendor next door to the old woman's stand walked over. "Molly," she said, "that man comes over here every day and buys and then fusses over your oranges, so why do I always see you underweigh them and throw a few extra in his bag?" With a twinkle in her eye and a little giggle, Molly replied, "Because I know what he's really doing. Oh, he's a big fan of my oranges. All of his complaining is just his sneaky way of making sure I get to eat one. And I never add extra. His love tips the scale in his favor every time." How do you like that? So if reality is our doing, then we have the power to create beauty wherever we go, just like Joe and Molly, through little simple things. All we have to do is give up our belief in deprivation and lack, our belief in separation, which takes us to old view 4. Old view 4, no pain, no gain. We've become accustomed to living in the life sucks paradigm. So accustomed to it that it never occurs to us that another reality, a happy reality, is possible. Pain, loneliness, and fear are the context within which we live our lives. We're so conditioned to wallow in misery that the concept of life as a joyous adventure seems impossible or even unnatural. But there's a different way to view life, and that's turning point view 4. Turning point view 4. There is no reason to struggle. Once we let go, surrender to the universal flow of life, life with a capital L, it will take over and handle the details. Now, in the book that I mentioned earlier, E Cubed, on page 6, Pam Grout wrote, "Every moment we waste on worst-case scenarios undermines our ability to create the true and the beautiful. Every moment we spend worrying erects a block between us and all the signs and opportunities, and yes, blatant love that is here for the sole purpose of our enjoyment." Here's a turning point thought. Heaven is actually within us, and we will experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. And let me just add my personal take on that. We will experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it and express it in our lives. In my opinion, expressing it is the key to realizing it. And now to our final old view. Old view 5. I'm not worthy of a good life. I am inherently flawed, inherently bad, or even I'm a sinner. This could have come from old religious teachings, our upbringing, or a variety of other ways, but this old view must be jettisoned. Turning Point View 5 says, my worthiness is not at stake. It never has been, and it never will be. There's nothing required of me to be worthy. I am worthy simply because of who I am. Because the truth is this: your soul, your spirit, your destiny, they're all part of the one true life, the life of God. Your real self is that which says, I am. It cannot be described because description is limitation, and your real self is unlimited in its capacity to be. It is the all possibility. It is love. That was Ernest Holmes in Talks on Truth, pages 78 and 79. Now, let's choose a position of power by affirming our worthiness. Together, we're going to say, I am worthy of, and fill in the blank. Pick one or all of them. Ready? I am worthy of. All that's good. There you go. So the crux of our morning talk is this. You have a choice as to which views you want to live. The old views or the turning point views. You have a choice right here, right now. And I'm going to share with you a really quick story of a guy who had an experience that very well could have been a tipping point, but which he chose to embrace as a turning point. And in doing so, he's inspired peace and positivity throughout the world. So over 100 years ago, this man opened his morning newspaper and, to his surprise and horror, read his name in the title of an article. Now, seeing his name in the paper wasn't such a big deal. He was often mentioned in there, but the problem was the rest of the article's title said that he was dead. Yeah. The newspapers had reported the death of the wrong person by mistake. It was, in actuality, his brother Ludwig, who'd passed from a heart attack while in France. Now, his first response was shock. He had to have experienced kind of an existential moment there, right? Like, I know if it were me, I'd have to take a beat and wonder if I was reading it from the great beyond. But then I'd come back online and figure it out. So when he regained composure, his second thought was to find out what people said about him. The article read, "Dynamite King dies." And below that, "The merchant of death is dead." The article went on to condemn him for his inventions, criticizing him as, quote, the wealthiest vagabond in Europe, and citing that he'd obtained his wealth by finding new ways to, quote, mutilate and kill innocents. This man was the inventor of dynamite, and when he read the words merchant of death, he wondered, is this really how I'm going to be remembered? It was in that moment that he made the choice, that turning point choice, to move toward a positive change. And that change is so profound that it continues to impact our world today. That man's name was Alfred Nobel. And he's remembered today by the Great Nobel Prize, 6 of which are awarded every year on December 10th, the anniversary of his passing. They're widely regarded as the most prestigious awards given for intellectual achievement in the world and are conferred in 6 categories: physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, physiology, and perhaps the most well-known, peace. Talk about a turning point, right? So when it really comes down to it, it's about choice. It's about making the active, conscious choice for good. Something that you've heard me saying every time I'm here. It always comes down to choice. So this month, for the next 29 days, starting right now, I want each of us to choose to put on the turning point views in new ways. Those of you that already have, it's time to take those to a deeper level. Those of you who haven't quite gotten there yet, this month is the time to do it. Now, you all have a copy of the turning points in the bags that were handed out earlier. Make sure you review those. Put them where you can see them and have a look at them as often as you have to really actualize those in your life. For those of you who have been coming here for a while, or have studied the science of mind, or been a practitioner of the science of mind, you may have heard something familiar in what I've said this morning. Did anyone catch it? No? Pieces of Ernest Holmes' Declaration of Principle, otherwise known as What We Believe, which, for those of you who like a little trivia, Holmes wrote it for the first issue of Science of Mind magazine in 1927, and it has been printed in every issue since. I want to share all of that declaration principle with you right now as our closing prayer. So close your eyes and sit comfortably, breathing deeply. Really listen. I'm going to phrase these as personal statements. Hopefully that'll help all of us take these in and make them ours. I believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one, indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. I believe in the incarnation of the Spirit in everyone, and that all people are incarnations of the one Spirit. I believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul, forever and ever expanding. I believe that heaven is within me and that I experience it to the degree that I become conscious of it. I believe the ultimate goal of life is to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. I believe in the unity of all life, and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. I believe that God is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. I believe in the direct revelation of truth through the intuitive and spiritual nature of the individual, and that any person who lives in close contact with indwelling God may become a revealer of truth. I believe that the universal spirit, which is God, operates through universal mind, which is the law of God, and that I'm surrounded by this creative mind which receives the direct impress of my thoughts and acts upon it. I believe in the healing of sick through the power of this mind. I believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. I believe in the eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, and the eternal givingness of life to all. I believe in my own soul, my own spirit, and my own destiny, for I understand that the life of all is God. And so, with these beliefs, let us fly into a new life, a life of God-fulfilled love, peace, joy, and plenty. And so it is. Amen.